Okay. We left off with the Columbian Exchange. Talked about Old World and New World goods that were exchanged. All right. Any questions about these goods or any comments? Old World goods, New World goods, and the Columbian Exchange. All right. Feel free to ask any questions or add any comments along the way. Everybody have their notes out? We good? All right. So when the worlds collided, European diseases obviously devastated the New World. The big killer was smallpox. Remember, the earliest strands of smallpox were being carried over by conquistadors, livestock, especially pigs. Tragically, some of the first slaves that were brought over by the Spanish and the Portuguese were carrying strands of smallpox. And a lot of times those diseases got trod before the conquistadors did. In one case in particular, the Inca were divided and in the middle of a civil war, and a lot of that had to do with smallpox outbreak that had reached them before Pizarro and his men had arrived. We talked a bit about the Native Americans infecting Europeans with syphilis, and that disease being sort of rampant throughout Europe. This is a primary document of smallpox victims. This would have been sketched by a Spanish conquistador in Tenochtitlan. Aztec smallpox outbreak. So what we're going to do is we're just going to look at the majority of the land that was controlled by the Spanish and the Portuguese. But you also need to realize this is an exploration race that's going on that involves other European nations as well. England, France, and the Dutch are going to get on the scene here to try to get claims to these lands as well. The Spanish and the Portuguese are going to have pretty much a 100-year domination of the transatlantic Columbian Exchange, where they're going to make a great deal of wealth off of the amount of gold and silver and other resources that they're pulling out of the Americas. Two agricultural goods that become very profitable are going to be sugar and tobacco. They also make a great deal on corn as well. They're going to move a lot of corn. But the big money maker, or the main prize, were Spanish galleons full of silver and gold. To settle a land dispute in the New World, a treaty will be formed between the Spanish and the Portuguese. This is also a bit of an alliance. The Spanish had been at war with the Dutch at sea. The French and the Spanish had squabbled. The French and the English had squabbled. And then we're going to learn about war that will wage between the Spanish and the English as well. The Treaty of Tordesillas will basically split South America in two. It divided the entire Western Hemisphere, with Spain getting the majority of the land. Since it was decided just a couple of years after Columbus's exploration, there's a lot of land that the Portuguese miss out on. But this treaty is the reason that people in Brazil speak Portuguese. That becomes their main sort of crown jewel of the land grab that they get out of the Treaty of Tordesillas. So let's take a look at some of these Spanish conquistadors that give Spain the quote-unquote rights to more of the land in Mesoamerica, North America, and South America. Also want to mention, it's more than just gold, God, and glory. The conquistadors will spread disease. They do establish Christian missions along the way, but not without enslavement of native people in two systems, the encomienda system and the asiento system, which we'll talk a little bit about. All right, let's talk a little bit about Vasco Núñez de Balboa. Balboa will be the first conquistador to cross the Isthmus of Panama, arrive in the Pacific, and he will lay claim everything from Panama along the coast of present-day California into the Pacific Northwest in honor of Spain. Balboa nearly dies on his trip, on his return trip through Panama. Will wind up back in Mexico City, or near Mexico City, and claims all of this area of the Pacific and Central America in honor of Spain. Juan Ponce de Leon will lay claim to Florida. He is in search of the City of Gold and a Fountain of Youth. He does not find either one. He does establish a citadel fortress, or what will become a citadel fortress, at St. Augustine. This is one of the oldest cities or settlements in North America. Anybody been to St. Augustine? Beautiful place. That citadel is incredible. You know what I mean by a citadel? I'm not talking about a military college in South Carolina. I'm talking about a military fortress. So, he is going to be killed by Native Americans in this voyage, or, overland campaign. All right. Ferdinand Magellan. Magellan will leave Spain in 1519. He will not return from the circumnavigation. His crew, part of his crew will. He'll be killed in the Philippines. But this will be the first European explorer to circumnavigate the globe. Anybody doing any research on Sir Francis Drake out there? So Sir Francis Drake will successfully circumnavigate the globe as well. We'll talk more about him in lesson 3. And then Cortez, I'm going to have a little bit more of a detailed description of Cortez's conquest. Cortez will conquer the Aztec and the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, present-day Mexico City. His expedition led to the fall of the Aztec Empire. Pizarro, you guys learned a lot about Pizarro in episode 2 of Guns, Germs, and Steel. That was the case study. Pizarro and his men will conquer Atahualpa and the Incan Empire. Hernando de Soto. De Soto was one of Pizarro's conquistadors. He goes on his own mission to basically finish what Ponce de Leon started. He does not find the golden city of Apalachee. He does find the Mississippi, but along the way, he was brutal toward tribes, used attack dogs, used steel collars to capture native people. When he died of disease, his body was mutilated, torn apart, and thrown into the Mississippi. He will be the first conquistador to reach the Mississippi. All right. And then Coronado. Coronado will give the Spanish claims to the southwest. He will be in search of the fabled 7 cities of gold that he believed the Hopi and the Zuni controlled. The Zuni and the Hopi are better known to us as the Pueblo, and they are the ancestors of the Anasazi. Coronado does not find the cities of gold. He will conquer the Pueblo, but along the way he will also be the first to travel the Colorado River. He will be the first to travel the Rio Grande, and he will be the first European to reach the Grand Canyon. He will go as far east as Kansas, present-day Kansas. He will also be the first European to see herds of buffalo and bison. Yeah, what's up? Sure. Are you guys going to be able to sit together or what? Like this isn't. I'm not going to do this every day. Okay. Like I'm being polite, but like if you know what my expectations are, right? I appreciate it. What's up?
This is a legitimate question. In Pocahontas, there's like the bad guy who looks kind of like that guy. Did they base the bad guy in Pocahontas off of him, or is like?
I think the bad guy in Pocahontas is Ratcliffe, maybe. He was a royal governor. I don't think so. I haven't seen Pocahontas in a very long time. I think it's a tragedy. You guys got this history that, was false.
Correct.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, like there was not a. We'll talk more about this when we get to lesson 3.
Pocahontas was like 12.
Correct.
Like 28.
Exactly.
She was 16.
Yeah.
She wasn't.
Yeah, but when they met, she was like as young as like 11 or 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was not a romantic relationship between her and John Smith. She married John Rolfe.
Yeah.
We'll get into this later. Lesson 3. Good job there. All right. So let's take a look at some of the economic impacts. The flood of gold and silver, launches a price revolution in Europe. So we have, for 150 years, prices will rise, inflation will rise, consumer costs will increase by 500% for a 100-year period. How many people are familiar with Adam Smith, a Scottish economist who wrote what? Very good, Wealth of Nations. Adam Smith points back to this as well, and as many historians and economists have over a very long period of time, that this amount of bullion, I'm not talking about little squares you drop in hot water, I'm talking about gold and silver, this money supply coming across the Atlantic is going to create modern day capitalism. All right? It also creates modern day commercial banking, joint stock companies, private investment, and some of the countries that take the lead in the banking industry are going to be France, England, and especially the Dutch and Holland. Silver opens up international markets in Asia. Caribbean islands become offshore bases for storage, conquest, and for the spread of what is called encomienda. This is a promise that a group of native people would be Christianized and freed, that they were Christianized and were held as slaves for life. This leads into what is known as the Asiento system. It's sort of like chattel slavery. Slavery for life, children born into that system also owned for life. I also want to mention that this is also the golden age of piracy. Okay? I don't know about any fans of piracy or pirates out there, but this is when people are either pirates or privateers. Okay? So what's the big difference between a pirate and a privateer? Yeah?
Doesn't like a privateer work for somebody, and then the pirate just does whatever they want to do?
Yep, that's it. A privateer is kind of like a pirate that is sort of legit and backed by a country. So a very famous privateer that we just mentioned earlier would be Sir Francis Drake, right? But a pirate like Edward Teach, better known as what? Blackbeard, very good. He worked for himself. It was like sort of like a democratic operation, and what they did was they would wreak havoc on Spanish and Portuguese galleons filled with gold and silver. Let's talk a little bit about the conquest of Mexico. Cortez will march on what is now Mexico City, Tenochtitlan, after his fleet of 11 ships, boarded with conquistadors, will travel to mainland Mexico. Along the way, they will pick up a handful of natives who spoke what would be sort of like the universal language in the region, which would be Maya. When he arrives, Montezuma II believes him to be the returning god Quetzalcoatl, the superior god of the Aztec people. This works out for some time, but the greed and the disease and the attempt to spread Christianity and the brutal treatment of the natives will lead to the Spanish wearing out their welcome in Tenochtitlan. The Aztec will launch a strike on June 30th, 1520, known as La Noche Triste, which would be the Night of Sorrows. The Spanish were almost defeated, but they will turn the tide of war and they will put the city under siege for a year. What do I mean by putting the city under siege? Okay, what? All right, well, they do more than just close watch. Bless you.
Enslave them?
They will ultimately enslave them. In a military siege, what do you typically do? You do take over, but if you can't take over on the interior, what do you do on the exterior? You're basically surrounding them, excellent, and cutting off all resources, coming in or out. That's what a siege is. So there is a siege mentality here, and the conquistadors will ultimately conquer the Aztec. They'll tear down the temples of Tenochtitlan, replacing them with cathedrals and Spanish-style architecture. The same will take place throughout Mexico, the Southwest, and all parts of California, where missions, cathedrals, and Spanish-style architecture will replace native-style architecture throughout. What's really crazy is in a 100-year period, disease just in Mexico alone takes the population from about 20 million in Mesoamerica down to about 2 million. Yes, go for it. So, Spanish laws are enforced. What style of religion? Catholicism and Christianity. Good job. Again, Old World, New World traditions kind of form as the mestizo tradition. So we have Quetzalcoatl here on the left, Cortez and Montezuma II on the right, and the Aztec capital below. So let's take a look at the spread of Spanish America. We've got colonies that grow, cathedrals are built, missions are built from Mexico and Central America along the coast of California. Universities in Mexico City and in Lima, Peru. This is 85 years before Harvard. Conquests in South America, Central America, and Mexico, and the Caribbean are going to lead England and France to get in the exploration race. England sends John Cabot, which we'll learn more about in Lesson 3. The French are going to send Verrazano and Cartier, which I'll talk a little bit more about here shortly. Spanish fortress built at St. Augustine, Florida in 1565, that incredible citadel fortress there. They also waged war on French Huguenots at Fort Caroline. The French actually beat the Spanish to a full-on settlement in Florida, but the Spanish mistakenly believed them to be Lutheran. So they gave the French an option. You could either denounce your religion and convert to Catholicism, or you die. Only a couple did. How do you think they executed them? Yes, crucifixion, 13 at a time, to represent Christ and the disciples. pretty messed up. All right. So Santa Fe, New Mexico becomes one of the earliest inhabited Spanish cities, but it also becomes one of the sites of the earliest Native American uprising. The conquistador Don Juan Oñate, need to put a little tilde on the end, my apologies there, is going to rule with an iron fist, and a tribal Pueblo chief and what we would consider a shaman by the name of Pope will rise up and lead one of the most successful Native American rebellions in the Americas. Spanish missions will be set up from San Antonio, Texas to Los Angeles, California. One of the most famous of those is going to be the mission at the Alamo in San Antonio, established in 1718. Another important person is Father Junipero Serra. He founds a chain of 21 missions from San Diego to Sonoma, California. Do you have any baseball fans out there? Used to be. If you, yes, sports fans. The San Diego Padres, that mascot is for Junipero Serra and the Franciscan Friars. The Padres, the dads, fathers. Good. Used to be an old like mascot of a little Franciscan friar swinging a bat. So this is the last part of the lesson I want to cover today. I'll wrap this up in our next class. So on the top left, Lima, Peru, the University of Lima, Peru. Top right, beautiful image of the Citadel Fortress at St. Augustine. Bottom right, Junipero Serra, the Franciscan friar. Bottom center, the Alamo in San Antonio, and then Oñate on the left. You guys have any questions? Yeah. Let's take a look at it, see if they're related. Make note of that. Yeah.
Where were those people crucified?
Near Fort Caroline, near St. Augustine. I'll get you some more information about it. It was in present-day Florida.